Jazz Video Guy Live. It's Thursday, May 7th, 2020. Hope everyone's doing well, staying safe, staying healthy, surviving these crazy times that we're living in right now.
Well, here we are again.
Oops, there I am over there.
Video Guy Live.
Okay, everything's working. Today my guest is Bob Mintzer. And you should know Bob Mintzer because he is a very celebrated musician, composer, arranger, tenor sax player, EWI player, educator at USC, and currently the conductor and arranger for the WDR band and big band in Germany. So a lot of accomplishments here. So let's start out, before we get to Bob, rather than me heap praise upon Bob or try to tell you exactly everything about him. I did a project with him a few years ago. I guess it was 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Bob did a Brazilian big band recording, and I was there to document some of it. The recording came out great, and at Manchester's Craftsman Guild in Pittsburgh, Marty Ashby's great organization. So let's take a look at a video I call All About Bob.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Bob's, and playing his music is one of the all-time treats. I remember my dad gave me, for a Christmas present in 1977, he gave me the Buddy Rich Plays and Plays and Plays record, and there was a Bob Mintzer chart on there called Tales of Rhoda-Rat, and from that day I became a huge fan. So it's really great to have been associated with the band for so many years and to be here tonight.
We did a lot of different things together in the city. There was a band called Cosmology with John Dirth. He was a trumpet player, a really good trumpet player. He had a band, like a sort of a, fusion, whatever, hippie fusion band. But I think Mintzer, he was playing tenor in that band. We played together with Idris Muhammad. Idris Muhammad had a band. And this is way before he did any, Bob was doing any big band stuff at all. Smooth and really prolific and really, really versatile, and just a heavy bopper, heavy bop thing. And he taught me some stuff. He taught me, he suggested some things to me about my playing. Said, you got nice sound, you got nice time, and try some of these chromatic things here. And he laid some stuff on me.
There's a lot of similarities, actually. I mean, sometimes the music he writes for the Yellowjackets, it reminds me kind of some big band writing, because the piano parts have a lot of the same kind of unusual, intricate rhythmic figures. Like, you could easily translate the piano part from a Yellowjackets song and orchestrate it for a big band. It would work really well.
Bob is writing better than ever. And I've always loved his writing, because his writing comes from the heart, it reaches the heart, but it never loses the hipness or sophistication that allows you to revisit it over and over again.
I play in the former Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra now, and we still have Bob's music in that band, and so I get to play those over and over, more than I do with his band even, especially with him out in L.A. Some of the Thad Jones stuff where I said, man, I've caught myself saying, that sounds like Bob Mintzer. And of course it's the opposite way around.
I find this batch that we're playing tonight very challenging, yeah, and we're hoping for the best, but the rehearsal went good, and they're very meaty. One of the challenges with something like this is the fact that we saw it for the first time yesterday, and we rehearsed for the first time yesterday, rehearsed a little bit today, and then we're going to hit here in about half an hour. So, yeah, I do find it challenging, but there's also something about having a player and a writer of Bob's caliber in front of you that inspires you, and you kind of feel like, let's let's rise up to the challenge and play this music like it should be played for him and for us as an ensemble.
You know, everyone's doing an incredible job. The cool thing about doing it in only 2 days, though, is that it's the big game. Everyone's really focused. And so far, nobody's dropping any of the balls. So.
The harmony is very detailed. The rhythms are very detailed, and you have to be very accurate. You have to be a good reader.
Some of these charts are probably the most challenging of all the music I've played of Bob. They're rhythmically quite demanding. It takes a lot of concentration to get it. The music is really potent.
Well, Bob has said this, and I think it's true. He writes for the musicians that are in the band, so I think he's thinking of the guys in his big band when he comes up with these parts, what would fit their style and strengths. And when he writes for the Yellowjackets, he's doing that as well.
So Brazilian music has its own swing. Now, Alex Acuna offered a very lovely definition of Brazilian music. He described it as being whereas most music is like a ball rolling down a plank or an incline, Brazilian music is like an egg rolling.
I think he's been studying that music and trying to incorporate more of the authentic rhythms, although I don't think he claims to be an expert, and it's kind of a hybrid, and I think he's okay with that. Rhythmically, they're very challenging. And I was talking to some of the other guys in the band, and I asked them how this compares with the level of difficulty of previous recordings, and they said, this is a hard one. I think rhythmically particularly, but also there's these really fast passages.
He's a very warm guy. He's very relaxed about his approach to music and dealing with people. And for a saxophone player, he's pretty cool. He's one of the least neurotic saxophone players I know. He's inspirational to me because of his work ethic, because he's so prolific, because he has such a broad base. He can write, he can conduct, he can play, he can improvise, and he's a consummate musician. He's an inspirational guy.
I really respect the way he runs his big band, and there's never anything that has to be done in a heavy-handed fashion at all. But he always gets what he wants. He's not afraid to just say, whoa, whoa, stop. How can we, and in a very positive way. You know, you saw at the rehearsal today how he was dealing with Peter Erskine, you know, a contemporary of his, just so much respect between the two of them. And you'd say that that's normal and that's to be expected, but it does take a special person to really not hurt people's feelings and create something that they didn't mean to when they're looking for something that player is already trying to give, but it's not quite right. So yeah, it's a unique thing in a good band leader, and Bob certainly is that.
So here we go, the one, the only, Bob Mintzer. Hey, Bob.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, Bob, you grew up in New Rochelle, New York. How did you get into jazz?
How did I get into jazz? How did I get into jazz? I got into music, actually, in a general sort of way that eventually led me to jazz. I mean, being close to New York City, that had a thriving jazz scene, it was inevitable that I would stumble onto jazz performance. I mean, one of the first performances I heard with musicians of some notoriety came through Jazzmobile. The Jazzmobile sent a quintet to the high school up in New Rochelle, and it consisted of Billy Taylor, Ron Carter, Grady Tate, Harold Land, and Blue Mitchell. And I was so taken by just the sound that this quintet made, and I thought, I'm going to do that one day. I also went to a music camp one summer when I think I was in 10th grade, and one of the counselors organized a field trip down to the village gate. And at that time, I couldn't have been more than 16, 17, maybe 16, and I was tall, and at that time they'd let anybody into the jazz clubs down there if you looked close to 18. And we went down there, and I heard the Miles Davis Quintet and the Thelonious Monk Quartet, and that was another head turner, and further cemented this idea of wanting to play this music.
Well, you got it together. You worked on your chops, and we're going to go to a story here about the time you tried or you did sit in with Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
I remember when I was 18, I had some far-flung notion that I could go sit in with Rahsaan Roland Kirk at the Village Vanguard, and I was so ill-prepared for this, but just had, of course, when you really can't play, you don't know this, so you do things that you really have no business doing, and that was definitely the case with me. So anyway, I got up enough nerve, I went down to the Village Vanguard. At the time, I was borrowing an instrument called a conophone. It was like a straight alto, but in the key of F, and I thought, in lieu of my inexperience, Rahsaan would at least be somewhat interested in this instrument, so maybe he'd take pity on me or whatever, let me play. So I go down there, and I show him this instrument, and he's feeling it, and he's going, yeah. So I could play a tune with you, and he went, yeah, okay, So this was the tradition back then on Sundays. Whoever was playing the Vanguard would let people sit in the last set. So I get up there, and there were some really serious, seasoned, experienced people sitting in, and me, who had no business being there, and played nice, easy blues, like that. And I thought, I'm going to be okay, I might make it. Got through the blues, played okay, everything seemed good, and then the next tune was Limehouse Blues, really fast, and I didn't know the tune, and the head went by in about 4 seconds, and they pushed me up to the microphone, and the rhythm section stopped. And there I was, and I had to play, and I made a good mess of that, and had to sort of slink out of the club, I just hoping, nobody saw me. And I went home with my tail between my legs, and that was a real deciding factor in my career, because at that point, number one, I knew I had a lot more work to do, and I swore to myself I would never let that happen again. So I went home and I practiced. So that was one.
Well, the same thing happened to Charlie Parker in Kansas City. When he was just getting his stuff together, he was in a jam session with Joe Jones, the great drummer, and Bird, I don't know what he was playing, but at the end of his solo, Joe Jones picked up his cymbal and he threw it on the ground. So, it takes a while to get it together. Bob, was Buddy's big band your first major gig?
It was my first major jazz gig, particularly a gig where you got to play every night, and that was a big game changer for me.
And we've heard a million stories about Buddy, but you saw him on the inside, and also I think he kind of encouraged you with your arranging, right?
He was a real dichotomy. I think he encouraged great playing, period. I mean, that's what he expected of everyone, and that was the deal. He was an old style band leader. He liked to poke and prod and see what you were made of. And I was a young man. I initially wasn't quite sure what to make of that, but I knew, deep inside, I was supposed to be there. I had a mission to accomplish, and not only did I learn how to play, but I did my first arranging for that band, and that was just so invaluable in terms of experience and learning how to write for great musicians, and I'm forever grateful. That's my takeaway from that situation. Yeah, Buddy, he could be very impatient and childish at times, but it was never dull. I'll tell you that. We had great times, and even when he was in a bad mood, there was this thread of humor through everything he did and said that was really entertaining. I mean, once you got past the fact that this guy was like melting down and screaming, it was hilarious a good deal of the time. And again, I was just grateful to have the opportunity to play every night and travel the world and learn stuff.
Well, you've worked in a number of big bands over the years. We know about the importance of the lead trumpeter and the drummer in a big band. What was it like with Buddy Rich playing behind you when you were soloing?
Oh man, it was a kick in the pants. He would make you play. First of all, he had this amazing ease of execution on the drums, and the fact that he was so comfortable in what he was playing really made you comfortable in a certain kind of way. And particularly like up-tempo stuff. I mean, I really learned how to play fast tempos with Buddy because he was so relaxed playing fast, and it rubbed off on you. It made you relax. And man, it was great. It was great playing with him. It was also great writing for him because, I would stop and think, okay, so what do I write that will bring the best out of Buddy? And what will I write that will make him comfortable? And, it was a great precursor to learning how to write for musicians I'm working with, and it's something, of course, all the great writers and band leaders practice. Duke Ellington wrote for his band. I write for my band or whatever band I'm in. And I learned a lot about that playing with Buddy.
And then you stepped into what was then the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra. Before you talk about that, let's look at a video from a great session that Bob did, I guess it was 8 years ago now, time flies, called Canyon Cove with Larry Goldings and Peter Erskine, who's worked with Bob in a number of contexts. Let's look at Bob's composition, Thaddeus, which is written for Thad Jones.
Thaddeus is named after Thad Jones, a great composer, arranger, big band leader. Thad's writing was pivotal. It sort of took what Duke Ellington had done and updated it to include rhythm and blues and more contemporary jazz devices and interesting and involved harmonic structures and counterpoints and classical composition. It all was rolled into this swinging, beautiful sounding music that had such a huge impact on my writing and thinking. I actually took one of his tunes called The Groove Merchant and took the harmonic structure of that tune and built a new melody on top of that. It attempts to capture the spirit of what Thad's music was about. Mr. Jones, how do you write?
Yeah. Is it difficult for you to watch yourself on video when you're playing?
No, it's instructive. I hear things I would do differently today, but I'm very proud and comfortable with the music I've made over the years. You know, generally I'm scrutinizing my own playing,
Yeah.
but no, it's not uncomfortable. It's not something I would necessarily choose to do with my time, but it's kind of fun, actually. I mean, I forget some of the things I've done in the past and forget how good some of it is. You know?
Absolutely. We've got a lot of comments and questions here from,
Yeah.
I'm going to put my glasses on, Carlos Araya. Thanks for this. We shared a stage with Bob and the USC Big Band at the Next Gen Jazz Festival in Monterey. Big hugs from Costa Rica and the CCCN Jazz Orchestra. Do you remember
Yep.
those cats, Bob?
I sure do. I do remember them. Yeah. And hello down in Costa Rica. Hope you guys are doing okay down there.
Yeah. Now here's another one. Mr. Mintzer, advice, encouragement for a 65-year-old retiree who now has time to learn to play jazz on trumpet. Hard as hell, and at times, I just want to give up. Years of job bills. Now it's dream time. So what would you say? What encouragement would you give to someone who's in the later chapters of life to have the discipline to actually learn how to play?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I would look at it as a challenge rather than an obstacle. And just, I mean, my motto is don't ever give up. Even and when something doesn't feel comfortable, keep chipping away at it. I mean, whenever I learn something new or try to integrate something new into what I'm doing, it's uncomfortable. And I know, though, that if I persevere and keep working on it, it will become more comfortable over time.
Yeah, I have something to add about that. You know, when you are trying to climb a mountain, if you look up at the top, you're never going to make it. You really have to enjoy the journey each step of the way. Because whether you're learning to play music or writing or doing many different things, it's a process. So you got to
Yeah.
dig the process. And
Yep.
here is another comment, Bob. Carlo Mango from Costa Rica again. I always heard that Buddy was not a reader. Can Bob comment on how Buddy dealt with confronting a new chart?
So that's an interesting topic. When I wrote for the band, I would generally play the drums on the first run through, and Buddy would sit and listen. And just from one run through, he managed to retain all the pertinent information on that new music to him, and we would then play it that night and forevermore. It was extraordinary, his Buddy's ability to just organize information in a new piece of music and retain that information. Yeah, he didn't read music, but I'm certain if had he found a reason to do so, he could easily have acquired the skill. But I think he had such big ears and a great musical ability to perceive music and sort of translating into how he would play the drums and accompany the music that he just saw no reason to learn how to read. So that's how I dealt with him. And interestingly, there was a thing I did where I would write certain rhythms into the horn section that would almost trick him into playing what I wanted him to play. So I would, I would write almost like something that a rhythm section instrument would play for the horns, and Buddy would, of course, hear all that and mimic it, and then play what I was hoping he would play.
Yeah, I hear you. Here's a question or a comment from Romans Legion, or he calls himself Doc from Dallas, Texas. Saw Bob with Jocko in 82, 83 along with Randy Brecker at a club in Dallas. I was in the front row right in front of Bob, and also at an empty rock ballroom, the Agora, which was the best concert I saw in my life. A few words about playing with Jocko, Bob.
It was really interesting, very challenging, great music, great musicians, pretty wide open. That experience really forced you to go beyond what you might normally play and come up with something unusual, different. It was great. It was a great experience. I'm really glad I got to play with Jocko and get to know him a little bit. And, nice memories.
Certainly, that music definitely stands the test of time. Another group that Bob has been involved with is the Yellowjackets. I'm going to play a clip for that, and then we'll talk about it. What is it, like 25 years now with the Yellowjackets?
30.
30 years. Okay, here we go with the Yellowjackets.
It's a leaderless band. There's no leader. It's a cooperative. And if you're a member of the Yellowjackets, you are called upon to make decisions, to write music, to really be integral in the direction of the band in every way, shape, and form. The band keeps evolving by way of each individual musician practicing, finding new ways to play, new ways to write. We all are very open-minded to listening to all kinds of musics from all over the world. And we are inspired by the differences between cultures and musics. And we're also very influenced by things that happen in the world. So from all this stimulus comes new ideas. And when the four of us get together and collaborate, great things happen.
Thoughts on the Yellowjackets? 25 years is a long run.
30 years.
30, I'm sorry. Well, how do you stay with a band for 30 years, and how does the band evolve?
They're my good friends. It's great music. No reason to not play with them. Every reason to play with them. And to be in a collaborative effort like that is extraordinary. It's something that continues onward and keeps morphing and growing and challenging all the members. And it's wonderful. And I think we all really appreciate and respect what we have, and we cherish what we have, and we're less likely to sabotage it, or sort of let egos get in the way, or let silly disagreements get in the way. We want to keep everything moving forward and on a positive plane, and that's how you do it.
Yeah. Let's see here. This is from Jazz Dury. Mr. Mintzer, C7, would you ever sub G flat 7 dash A7 and E flat 7 for each other and mix and match?
Yeah, that's a whole area of discussion, but you can substitute a lot of things for a lot of things. But in terms of dominant seventh chords for a C7, you could easily play off of going up in minor thirds, E flat 7, G flat 7, A7. That's certainly something. The thread that connects all that is the half whole diminished scale, which again is a scale that repeats every minor third.
Here's another thing about the Yellowjackets from Scott. What keeps the Yellowjackets fresh and evolving?
Just the desire to do so. We're all very open-minded musicians in terms of looking far and wide for influence, and I think rather than thinking, what can we write that will be successful? What can we write that is any particular thing? We think about the four of us, how we would like to play together, what we would like to project philosophically and musically, and then we just write for the band. And it inevitably, I think, as a result of an individual bringing in a song and then the four of us getting our hands on it, the song has the sound and flavor of the Yellowjackets.
Absolutely. Let's go to some example of Bob straight ahead playing. This is Doxy, Sonny Rollins tune with Bob and Chuck Israels on bass.
Remember the good old days that
Yes.
who knew that they were going to be the good old days?
Amen. So we want to play Doxy,
Yeah,
but this
sure.
Sonny Rollins. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's on the broadcast today. Bob, we have 106 people joining us right now. That's a new high for the Jazz Video Guy Live series. We have people from Romania, from Ghana, and here's a question from Italy, from Vincenzo Marco Bernardi. Hello, Mr. Video Guy. I guess that's me. A question from Italy. I would like to ask Mr. Mintzer. Who were his heroes, the musicians, in terms of development for his sense of the blues?
Oh man. Well, my musical heroes have been, always will be, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk. Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Sonny Rollins, George Coleman, Count Basie. The list goes on and on. I mean, all musicians in all genres, and the blues is a connecting thread that goes through all of it. I've listened a lot to guitar players over the years. I played guitar before I played saxophone, so tried to imitate B.B. King, Albert Collins, Muddy Waters. Blues is part of the fabric of a lot of what we do today.
Absolutely. Now, Bob, you have been for a long time very involved in jazz education. And there was a question here. Is there, from Carlo Mango in Costa Rica, is there a difference in the interests of students today compared to your process when you were in development?
I think there's the same level of desire to learn and play well. I think the major difference is the tools that are available today versus what we had, when I was coming up. We didn't have internet, of course, cell phones. The ability to slow down recordings and transcription projects. So it was all a very different scenario. When you bought a recording, it was an LP, and you savored this LP, you held it, you listened to it countless times, you learned every note on there, versus today where, you're less likely to buy a CD. If you're lucky, you'll purchase a download. Otherwise, you're on YouTube, accessing. Granted, a wealth of information, which can be useful, but there's not the same level of commitment in a certain way that, if you spent your monthly allowance buying the next Miles Davis LP, you really made good use of it and learned it thoroughly.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm not supposed to say That's very unprofessional. Let's look at an example of a Bob Mintzer masterclass.
I'm Bob Mintzer, saxophonist, bass clarinetist, electronic wind instrument player. I play with a band called the Yellowjackets, occasionally lead my own quartet, big band leader, and I'm here to hopefully help you to play the saxophone better. Frequently people ask me, how do you work on sound? And it's somewhat of a of an elusive subject in the sense that a lot of different components determine what your sound is like. I mean, it varies from who your influences were in terms of who you listen to. It involves the kind of person you are, the kind of physical makeup you have, what you do with the various components of embouchure and technical matters. All these things influence your sound, so to speak. And I'd like to talk a little bit about things I've considered and work on with students in terms of working and developing a sound. The sound of a saxophone player is the essence of their makeup, their personality, how they put the notes together, what they do when they sustain a note, how they start a note, how they end a note. Is their tone bright? Is it dark? All these things are considerations that influence sound. I mean, you know, and there's such a wide spectrum. You know, the older players had more of a bottom to their sound, a darker quality. You know, if you were to hear Coleman Hawkins or somebody play Body and Soul, there was, you know, a leaning towards the lower overtones, you know, with this what we call subtone element involved, where it might sound something like this.
Well, that's a little taste. If you want the whole masterclass, you can get it on Bob's website. Some more comments and questions here. JC wants to know, do you have any advice for a young big band arranger?
Sure. Just listen to, you know, all the great big bands. Bathe your brain with the sound of big bands. You know, what's ideal is to actually play in big bands. That way you're getting firsthand, on the job exposure to the sound. I mean, that's what I did on Buddy's band. You know, after a year of playing that music every night, the sound was in my head, and then it became a matter of just kind of interpreting that sound by way of knowing what the capabilities of the various instruments in the band were, and how then to write for them in some sort of sensible musical way. You can look at scores. Scores are very informative. There's arranging books. I mean, I never used arranging books. I was definitely an on-the-job trainer, but there's so much information out there. But I think the main issue with any kind of music you want to write is that you bathe your brain in the sound of it, and get in the habit of thinking inside the sound so that you have some idea of how things are put together.
Yeah. A number of people are commenting about the Mel Lewis, Herbie Hancock record. Do you have any thoughts? Do you remember that session?
I do. That was. I just remember I got a call from Mel's manager. I think I had left the band by then. That would have been around 1980, 79 or 80, and they were going to the Montreux Jazz Festival and wanted to know if I could arrange a bunch of Herbie's music for this project. And I said, of course. But I had a very short time to work on this. I think maybe a week tops. And I just sat day and night and I wrote, I think, 5 arrangements. And it was really an interesting process in that, typically when I would write before that, I would really labor over things, spend time, do a lot of editing. But in this instance, there was no time to do that. I just had to forge ahead, and I wrote these 5 big band charts. And now, mind you, I wasn't a real experienced big band arranger at that juncture, but I knew I had to keep moving. And it was very instructive in that I think I got a sense of what it means to keep moving, not overly analyze or criticize what you're writing, but to get through something and get it all sort of put together. I also, had experienced the process of, doing a sketch, like sort of getting a general idea of how to lay out the chart, and then filling in, with each consecutive go around. So it was a really helpful, eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah. Now, you've done a lot of work with big bands. You played with Buddy and Thad and Mel, and your own big band. The WDR band, of which you are now, is it arranger, conductor, or just conductor?
I am the chief conductor, which I've never been the chief of anything before, but it's kind of nice. And in actuality, Vince Mendoza and I are somewhat splitting the major arranging, conducting duties, but there's a whole stable of arrangers that work with that band. They do a lot of wonderful projects of all different kinds.
Now, people may be unfamiliar with the WDR big band. There's a bunch of them. Bob, why are these big bands in Europe? How do they survive? What's the story there?
Well, there are three full-time big bands and one part-time big band in Germany alone. And they are funded by a pot of money that comes from citizens in Germany paying a monthly fee for use of hardware, as in television, radio. And that money then funds full-time musical ensembles. And I think that's a pretty good indication that most of Europe, if not parts of Europe, really value and appreciate the merits of having arts and culture be predominant in daily life. So it's a wonderful opportunity for everyone, for musicians, for music fans, for composers, arrangers like myself, and very grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, let's take advantage of a wonderful opportunity here and hear Bob with one of these big bands. We can talk about it afterwards. This is Caravan. is that the SWR band?
Yeah, that's SVR big band from Stuttgart.
Yeah.
Well, that was a long time ago. I think that was early '90s, I believe, right?
Yeah, well, you've been around for a little while, my friend.
I have. That was before. Actually, I think I worked with the WDR big band first. That was the first band I worked with. That would have been in the late '80s, and and then the next band I worked with was actually I'm wrong. I was in a band called Stone Alliance, and we did something with the Hamburg, the NDR big band back in the '70s, late '70s. With that group, it was Stone Alliance. That was Kenny Kirkland, Don Elias, Gene Pearl, and myself. Then the WDR was next, and then I worked with the Frankfurt band several times before hooking up, on a more regular basis with the WDR big band. So yeah, great bands, great outlets for musicians in Germany and Europe, and just, man, forever grateful.
From Sweden, a viewer wants to know a little bit about your Swedish connections with Swedish big bands. Ever work with Swedish big bands?
Most definitely. So here's the thing: if you're a player and an arranger, and you have a little bit of a reputation as being both, there's opportunity all over the world for you. I can't tell you how many big bands I've worked with over the last 40 some odd years, and Sweden has been, really one of the major destinations. The Stockholm Jazz Orchestra was a band I worked with numerous times, Fredrik Norén, and a great band there. There's a band up in Gothenburg called the Boozlan Big Band. I worked with them several times. Yeah, there's bands everywhere. And, it's, I suppose, the symphony orchestra of jazz, and a compelling reason to not only be a player, but be a writer, arranger, because there's lots of large ensembles that are looking to play good music.
I want to talk a little bit about tenor playing, but we've come to the end of the broadcast. Bob, can you stay another 10 or 15 minutes?
Sure, happy to.
Okay, great. Here's a question. What is your opinion of such players as Joe Farrell, Sal Nistico, and Joe Romano, who were great players but never made it big?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of making it big. All three of those guys had long, fruitful careers playing the music they love. So to me, that's making it big. Joe Farrell was a friend of mine, played great. I mean, he did a lot of different things. I mean, of course, he played in the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band. He worked with Chick Corea, did a lot of session work in New York. He was a great band leader in his own right, wonderful musician. Sal Nistico was one of the scariest saxophone players on the planet. I mean, he's just an unsung hero. I mean, the stuff he did with the Woody Herman Band was extraordinary. I mean, he and also was an acquaintance, somebody I got to work with a little bit. And Joe Romano, also, I mean, a great saxophonist, had an illustrious career. Maybe wasn't a household name, but got to play this music for his whole life. So, three great musicians for sure.
James Hall, jazz vibraphonist, says, looks, plays, and sounds like Bob Berg, meant in the best possible way. Which I'll turn that into a question. We're of the same generation, and we came up around the same time, and we're also Jewish. Michael Brecker, Bob Mintzer, and Bob Berg, your contemporaries. Could you say a few words about Bob Berg and Michael Brecker?
Yeah, actually, one time I was in Baltimore playing a gig, I think with Sam Jones, and this woman came up and gave me this big hug and said, "Bob, so good to see you." And I realized she thought I was Bob Berg. And so at that point, I thought, this is pretty serious. A lot of people must think I'm Bob Berg. And in fact, it's sort of been something that's followed me around to this very day. I mean, rest his soul, Bob passed away, I don't know, 15 years ago in a terrible car accident. But even now, I'll be walking somewhere and somebody will go, "Bob Berg." It's like, no. Thankfully, not at this juncture, but Yeah, I guess we look alike. I guess it depends how detail oriented you are. It's fairly easy to say somebody sounds like somebody or looks like somebody, but in actuality, nobody sounds just like somebody or looks just like somebody else. It could be, though, in that video, I did kind of look like Bob, for whatever the reason. I mean, we have similar backgrounds, and certainly I was aware of his playing. We all had similar influences, and I guess I did play like him. I played like Mike Brecker at a certain point, but then I moved on and sort of expanded on my influences. And I think just through the process of writing, playing, making records, you kind of develop a sound of your own.
And a few words about Michael Brecker. You actually did a two-tenor record with Michael, right?
Yes, I did.
What was that called?
That's called Twin Tenors.
Twin Tenors.
And yeah, Mike was, an amazing musician, one of the hardest working musicians I know, and played great, and super guy. Knew him for a long time, and yeah.
Bob was a remarkable fellow. Bob, what are you working on now? I mean, we're living in some crazy times here. I know you teach at USC. You got the WDR Big Band. Once this thing clears up, I don't know when the hell that's going to be. What do you look forward to do? What types of playing situations?
Well, I'm still in the Yellowjackets. Looking forward to getting that back up and running and going to write for that group. I'm still with the WDR. I'm actually working on music now that was supposed to have been performed actually this week, and it's been moved to December. Been talking to the MCG people about a possible project somewhere down the road, something a little different than what I've done thus far. And I mean, who knows? We're talking about it. There's going to be an artist of residence situation with the Yellowjackets, and thinking about that. There's just all sorts of things on the front burner. But for right now, with everything kind of shut down, I'm practicing, I'm writing, I'm reading, I'm exercising, I'm trying to eat well, I'm spending time with my wife, and in trying to enjoy life and make the most of these challenging times.
Well, they are challenging, and certainly music is a way for us to get through this. I think your last big band record was Get Up. Let's look at something from that.
This next piece is inspired by James Brown, the godfather of soul, and the tune Get Up Like a Sex Machine is a great tune, and it's got a great groove to it. And what we do frequently as composers, arrangers, is hear something that really kind of inspires us, and we take some essence of the tune and try to build something new on it and take it in a different direction. So that's what I attempt to do here. This is something called Get Up.
Yeah. Wow, where am I? Here I am. Oh, interesting sax section there, man. People are complimenting Roger. It was Roger Rosenberg, Bob Shepard, Bobby Malik, Lawrence Feldman, and you. That's a pretty awesome rhythm section. Awesome sax section.
It's a pretty awesome section.
Yeah. And we had Russ Ferrante on keyboards, Will Lee on bass, and Will Kennedy on drums.
Ray Oviedo on guitar.
Ray on guitar, yeah.
It was my dream band. I mean, all these guys I've worked with for many, many years, and this was. I mean, I had this idea for quite a while to do this sort of R&B based big band project, and it had to be these people. And I flew them all into Pittsburgh, and we did this project. And man, I'm so grateful I got to do it, because it was something I really wanted to do.
Well, it came out great, and it was great to be there. And you know, one of the things about being at a session like this is the love and the humor that happens between the musicians. You know, I was a jazz listener when I was 10 years old, but when I got to New York and I got to the Vanguard and I hung out in the kitchen of the Vanguard, and I felt the love and the humor, the way people related to each other as part of this community. It was a beautiful thing. And, you know, all the sessions that I've done with Bob, it's basically the same as well. Bob, we've burned through an hour and 13 minutes here. We've still got a lot of people online. We can't go any longer, but will you come back and join us again sometime?
Sure, happy to. And Brett, I just have to say, I'm so grateful for all that you do. You know, you're just a champion of this music, and just the way you you document it and keep the musicians in view. I just so appreciate everything you've done, not only with myself, but all the great musicians that you've documented in your videos. And it's such an honor and a pleasure to talk with somebody that is knowledgeable about the music, not only knowledgeable about putting together a cohesive video. So many, many thanks for all you do.
Well,
and thanks for everybody for coming on to this thing. And man, please support Brett Premack. Please support jazz music. Please support jazz and video, because that's what we got right now.
that's it. You know, this whole live thing is live streaming for now. It's what we got. Thanks everyone for participating, for listening. Thanks to my friend Bob Mintzer. We didn't get into a lot of stuff with him because we cut by the time, but I can tell you that Bob has an incredible house on a street called Canyon Cove in LA, a house that was once owned by Arnold Schoenberg, the composer, and a lovely wife and wonderful son and a great dog named Sonny. I don't know where that name came from. I have some ideas. So we'll see you next time on Jazz Video Guy Live.